You're good to go.
Hi, I'm Father Martin, and you are watching The Priest Post. Today we're going to be speaking about incarnational faith. Sometimes when we are confronted by the realities of life, we can think to ourselves, if God was actually with me, my life wouldn't look like this. There's a truth and a lie that's involved in that. Sometimes we have distanced ourselves from God, and so we're not living out God's will in our lives, and that leads to sin, which leads to disruption, that leads to having a whole variety of, what am I trying to think of? I can't think of it. Disordered affections in our lives. That can lead to things like division and destruction in our relationships. That's different than sometimes just realizing that the idea that I have of what my life ought to look like is different than the call that God has for me in my life. Think of it this way. I imagine that Mary and Joseph had a very different idea of what marriage was going to look like than what it looked like. I imagine that Mary did not presume that she was going to be carrying the Lord by the Immaculate Conception. I imagine Joseph didn't think that he was going to have to live in exile, that he was going to be a migrant worker, that he was going to have to be the foster father to the Son of God, that they were going to be persecuted and pursued. They didn't think that their marriage is going to look like that. But what they realized is that God was with them at every single moment. Even Jesus in his public ministry is often rejected. Why? Because he looks so normal. He didn't live up to the expectations that people had of what the Messiah ought to look and sound like. And so in my own faith life, sometimes I can also reject the reality that God's calling me to because I don't think it looks or sounds or feels like I think it ought to. And instead of becoming despairing or despondent, what this is actually an invitation to is to sacrifice or lay down on the altar my own idea for the reality that God has placed before me. That what we believe is that God is always present to us. That assuredly all of us have moments in our lives that are imperfect, that are difficult. It seems like we're a cross that we have to carry that we don't want to. But that doesn't mean that God isn't with us. That Jesus is incarnate, that he comes to be with us in the midst of those challenges, in the midst of those struggles, in the midst of carrying the cross. That certainly many people didn't think that love poured out was going to look like Jesus crucified. But that's what love poured out looks like. It's a scary thing for us. And so if you find yourself encountering a cross, if you find yourself encountering a reality that you say, I really just don't think that this is what God has intended for me, I challenge you to do this. Ask the Holy Spirit to open your eyes and to see what Jesus is doing in your life. Maybe he is calling for a radical conversion. Maybe he does want to do something dramatically new. Or maybe, just maybe, he's inviting you to embrace the incarnation. He's inviting you to find God in the mess. And if we find him in the mess, then we have an interior peace, an interior consolation that nothing in this world can take from us. So Holy Spirit, open our eyes. Help us to receive the incarnation again and to be able to see you as you come. Alyssa Norberg, Cookie Monster, dinging all over the place, ladies and gentlemen. Incarnational Faith.